50 cents. For over 4 years, this sticker was a piece of junk in your inventory, a bulk item. In September, it sold for over $400, or an 800-time return on investment. Bitcoin didn't do that. Ethereum didn't do that. Real estate didn't do that. Nothing did that. And if you weren't playing CS, then you missed it. Now, 2025 was a great year for Counter-Strike skins, but it wasn't just a great year. It was the most volatile year. It was the most manipulated year. It was the most insane year we've ever seen. We had Chinese pump groups turning stickers and skins into more expensive items in gold. We had an update vaporize the market cap in half in a little under 6 hours. And we also had various skins floating around that either gave you thousands of dollars or took away thousands of dollars. So let's break down all the winners, all the losers, and one story that'll never happen again. Now here's what's different about 2025 compared to other years past. A lot of these gains weren't organic. It wasn't the old boring, slowing down supply, increased demand bullshit. We had pure cinema in the market, and it was from two forces mainly. We had China and a large amount of capital from them entering the market, and Valve playing God and implementing updates that change fundamentally how the market works. But for every winner in a market, there's always someone who loses. Let's start with our most reliable and least volatile asset in Counter-Strike, the case. Now all you gotta do is hold a specific case from January 1st until right now, and you'd be up pretty big. We'll start with the Fracture case. The Fracture case opened the year at 19 cents, and it sat in the active supply pool for many, many years at this point, meaning that there was an overwhelming supply and not a lot of reason to buy in bulk. When the Genesis terminal was released to Counter-Strike players, Valve finally took the Fracture case out and implemented it into the rare drop pool. Simple update, but a massive demand shock, and people wanted to take advantage of it. At its peak, it hit around 55 cents right after news of the discontinuation, which is almost a 3x just for holding. It has since went down a little bit, but if you bought before this pump, you should be up pretty handedly. The Snaky B followed a pretty similar path, although it is just a year older than the Fracture. But this one was also just starting out in the rare pool, causing it to reach 60 cents as little as 2 weeks ago. That's more than a 3x, and this one is still climbing, not as long as a timeline as the Fracture will be. But the real case story comes from the glove case. This thing started the year on January 1st at $5 on the dot. Already pretty expensive, maybe not too much to run by most people's standards, which is why a lot of people stayed away from it, which allowed for Chinese investment groups to take advantage of that fact. The glove case and its contents became some of the highest prestige items in the game, and China still controls most of the circulating glove case supply. By 2 weeks ago, December 10th, the glove case peaked at $24.80. Almost 5 times your initial investment had you held from January 1st. For a less risky, less volatile asset such as the case, that is a pretty damn good return. It's since pulled back to $20, but you still can't really complain about a 4x investment, especially when the timeline is usually much longer than a year. Now while that's interesting, let's get to the real juicy shit. The update that changed everything. October 23rd, Bloody Tuesday. Or the Great Depression, wherever you want. For years, covert skins were pretty useless. If the skin itself wasn't desirable, there wasn't really much to do with it. You couldn't trade it up, and since it was the only class of guns that you couldn't trade up, the supply was usually overwhelming, and for guns that nobody wanted, would result in the prices being extremely depressed. Not only does that lower the case ROI, but subsequently the underlying case prices. Even pinks were better to buy in most case collections because they simply provided more value. Until Valve dropped the knife trade-up update. Suddenly, every red or covert skin in the game became a direct path to the knife. And for a few hours on that fateful night, those $3 reds that were sitting there for years just became a $15 knife. It was a wild goose chase to get in there, but if you did, you profited big time. Now, intuitively, but ironically, the least desirable coverts in the game were the ones that ended up seeing the most gains. Allow me to run through some of the highlights. The FAMAS roll cage from the Gamma case went from $11 at the start of the year to $200 at its peak, and it sits around $165 right now. Undesirable skin in a case collection that only has 2 cases that produce the knives in the Gamma collection, which are fairly desirable. In the same way, the PP buys in Judgment of Anubis. This is in the Chroma collection, which only has 3 cases that produce those knives. This one went from $6 in factory new to $130. The Og Chameleon, which is an input for the original knife collections, went from $3 to $90, 30x. P250 See You Later Spectrum case, much like the Gamma, only 2 cases, went from $7 to $170. But the grand champion was the M4A4 Buzzkill. Now, this already saw a little bit of pumping beforehand by Chinese investors. However, if you bought at the start of the year, it was $23 and it hit $1,100 at its peak a few months ago. It was a 48x on a shitty ass M4. This was the greatest wealth shift in Counter-Strike history and probably in a lot of markets history. And all that money that entered the Covert market left the knife and glove market, right? That money has to come from somewhere. Pretty much every knife and glove was no stranger to having its price bent over by Valve and fucked. Firstly, the Vice gloves. Probably the most recognizable gloves in the game. It's at around $15,000 in factory new at the start of the year, and the knife trade-up update caused a crash to as low as 7,000, but has since recovered to around 9 to 10. Still down currently 40%. And even though China bought up those glove cases as fast as they could, the gloves within them still saw a crazy loss by the knife trade-up update. The Hedge Maze and the Pandora's Box sport gloves were two of the most desirable, highly valued items within the case. In factory new, the Hedge Maze gloves stood at around $60,000 US. The Pandora's Box, 70. Both down 40 to 50%. The Hedge Maze down to the $20,000 to $30,000 range. The Pandora's Box down to $36,000 in its most recent sale. Now, funnily enough, if you had bought either of these gloves on January 1st, you'd be break even. That's how nuts the inner 11 months were of this market. So you could be even, or you could be down a Tesla Model S. Now, since then, we've seen a lot of the other gloves in the glove case actually go up pretty handedly. However, that is a whole topic for another day. There's so much subject matter there. As for the Today's video has been sponsored by the lovely ladies and gentlemen over at SkinsMonkey.com. SkinsMonkey is the industry standard trading forum and marketplace for anything and all things Counter-Strike. 24/7 support and an instant trading system so fast, those Bulgarian overpay goblins are sure to go out of business. Now, if that's not enough incentive, throw my code Mike in on the website for $5 off on your first trade. But if you trade up to $100 on the website, they'll double your bonus from 5 to 10. Now, if you don't have any skins, and I just gave you some free game on investment advice, you could deposit money and use the website as a marketplace as well. In that case, my code Mike will net you a 5% deposit bonus, bringing it from 30 to 35%. So go get swagged out, courtesy of SkinsMonkey.com. Nice side of things. The biggest loser was the Phase 2 Doppler knife. Now, Phase 2s always carried a premium. Phase 2s are known for their bright pink finish, which quickly became a favorite of China, pro players, and collectors alike, which caused the price to be disproportionately higher than the rest of the other three phases. But Phase 2 is not any more rare than any of the other three phases. So when you add knife trade-ups, and you count for the fact that Dopplers had a 4x more chance to be pulled from the trade-up because each phase was treated as its own finish, you had a wild supply of Phase 2s enter the market. And with that, the premium collapsed, which caused a higher percentage decrease for the Phase 2s when compared to other knives. The Karambit Phase 2 Doppler was going for around $5,000 to $6,000 for most of the year, and right now it's at $2,500. I got one for $1,600 on the day of the crash, which is what, minus 75% or something ridiculous. The M9 bayonet, $3,500 to $1,500. The skeleton knife was hit the hardest because it's in the currently active fever case, which meant that there was a lot of existing supply of reds already. And then if you wanted to, you can open up as many as you want right now. This one went from $2,500 to a little bit under $1,000 at its lowest point. If you were long knives in 2025, could have been a very rough year for you. And sadly, a lot of people were. It was regarded as probably the safest investment for most of the year and, the 10 years before this. Next, we have agents. Now, agents haven't been dropped in years. The last one, I believe, is the Broken Fang operation, which was 2020, which is now 6 years ago in about 12 hours. China saw the opportunity, low supply, it's been a few years, and they ran with it. Across the board, most agents doubled or tripled, but there were a few standouts. The Trapper was a specific target of the Chinese, and coordinated buying brought it from $10 to $50 at its highest point in the summer. The medium rare agent, which is the shirtless dude, went from 16 to around 80. So both of them around 5x your initial investment. Now they've pulled back since then, but every agent is still up from where it was on January 1st. And we also have some skins. We just talked about all that red and lost, but there were a lot of guns that went extremely high in value. Here are some, but it is not limited to this list. There are many more. The M4A4 Horus went up on its own merit throughout the year due to increased demand, probably by China, because they like the M4A4 more. But it further spiked when the Anubis collection was discontinued just a few weeks ago. From 400 at its lowest point to over 2,000 right now, a 5x. The M4 Hellfire was a direct target of Chinese manipulation. This one sat at around $50 and at its peak hit 1,000, so a 20x there. The Opus CMYK from the Armory in the graphic design collection had its price depressed at its lowest point in the middle of the year at around $400. And right at that discontinuation, it hit $2,500, almost 6x your initial investment there. The MP9 is setting up to be the new target of Chinese manipulation, it looks like, as there are a few targets that have been increasing steadily in price over the year, and some even in the last month. The MP9 Hot Rod is ephemeral. It started at $100 this year and gradually has reached $600 as of about a month ago. Still, it's around 500. In the last month, we've saw 2 MP9s go up extremely high. The Stained Glass, which is from the Canals collection, which is a little bit odd because the Canals collection hasn't really been touched yet, so they may be something to look at in the future. And also the MP9 Setting Sun, which is from the Cash collection, which we can reasonably assume is because of the hype surrounding Cash coming back to the game. I would stay away from that one, but the Stained Glass might be something to look at in future. Now there are plenty more, as I said, but these kind of capture the essence of the year. China, updates, discontinuations, things of that sort. And lastly, the Magnum Opus. This story will be told for years. It is the craziest shit to happen in this market ever. The Evil Geniuses Stockholm 2021 holographic sticker. For 4 years and the 6 months in the start of 2025, this thing consistently sat under $1, ranging from around 30 cents to 70 cents. It was bulk bullshit that you got from your case and then sold because you were annoyed. Now, accumulation started to accrue in around July, in which Chinese investors really started to make a splash in the market. Prices crept up, they hit $1, then $2, then all the way up to $5 in the month of July. Decent gains. Anyone with a brain sold right there, right? Can't complain. 5x, take it, get out. That sticker shouldn't even be anywhere near that point. But unfortunately, that win just kept getting bigger. Every day, and I mean every fucking day, barring a few 2 to 3 hour pullbacks, the EG Holo just kept going up. And around 2 months later, in mid-September, it hit its apex. Around $250 on third-party sites, or as high as $400 on the Steam marketplace. If you bought one for 50 cents at any time over the last 4 years, you were sitting on an 800x return, outpacing every single asset on fucking Earth, barring a few. Now, I opened a capsule and got one, and I sold it, and it sold in 15 seconds, which meant it was highly liquid and people were buying it at $3.50. And then within seconds, seemingly, the floor vanished. Back down to $7 as fast as it climbed up to $400. As recently as a week ago, another pump was attempted, but it's not going to ever come close. And if there's one story that captures really the entire essence, it's this one. China, euphoria, dump. No news yet, but I bet you a couple people vertigoed themselves. Now, 2025 is not defined by market fundamentals. It was defined by China and Valve's updates. Both created opportunities and both created disasters. What's in store for us in 2026? Who knows? Armory Systems still new. Genesis Terminal gives us a lot of questions as to what their plan is regarding the future of Counter-Strike monetization. And new money finds the market every day. I know one thing that'll be better in 2026, and that's YouTube. Because your boy's here now. I'm here to stay, cocksuckers. See you next year.